Welcome back in part 3 of Firefox. Anyways, let's continue. There are desktop versions of Firefox for Microsoft Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, while Firefox for Android is available for Android, formerly Firefox for mobile. It also ran on Mimo, Migo, and Firefox OS, and Firefox for iOS is available for iOS.
Smartphones that support Linux but not Android or iOS apps can also run Firefox in its desktop version, for example using Postmarket OS, Mobian or Ubuntu Touch.
Notes. In March 2014, the Windows Store app version of Firefox was cancelled, although there is a beta release.
SSE2 instruction set support is required for 49.0 or later for Windows and 53.0 or later for Linux. IA-32 support only applies to superscalar processors.
And the x64 built for Windows, introduced with Firefox 43, was exclusive to Windows 7 and later.
All previous versions of Windows have to use the IA-32 build.
Firefox source code may be compiled for various operating systems. However, officially distributed binaries are provided for the following. Firefox 1.0 was released for Windows 95, as well as Windows NT 4.0 or later.
Some users reported the 1.x builds were operable, but not installable on Windows NT 3.51.
The version 42.0 release includes the first x64 build.
It required Windows 7 or Server 2000 AR2.
Starting from version 49.0, Firefox for Windows requires and uses the SSE2 instruction set. In September 2015, Mozilla released a Metro-style version of Firefox, optimized for touchscreen use, on the Aurora release channel.
However, on March 14, 2014, Mozilla canceled the project because of a lack of user adoption.
In March 2017, Firefox 52 ESR, the last version of the browser for Windows XP and Windows Vista, was released.
Support for Firefox 52 ESR ended in June 2018.
Traditionally, installing the Windows version of Firefox entails visiting the Firefox website and downloading an installer package, depending on the desired localization and system architecture.
In November 2021, Mozilla made Firefox available on Microsoft Store.
The Store distributed package does not interfere with a traditional installation. The last version of Firefox for Windows 7 and 8 is Firefox 115 ESR, which was released in July 2023.
Its end of life was initially planned to be in October 2024. However, in July 2024, a Mozilla employee announced in a comment on Reddit that the company consider extending the support beyond the initial date, the duration of that extension being yet to be defined.
In September 2024, the extension was announced for an initial period of 6 months.
In the release calendar page, a note states that Mozilla will reevaluate the situation in early 2025 to see if another extension will be needed or not, and statute about 115 ESR end of life then.
This extension has been renewed one more time on February 18, 2025 for 6 additional months, which led the end-of-life date on par with the 12080 SR branch in September 2025. The first official release, Firefox version 1.0, supported Mac OS, then called Mac OS X on the PowerPC architecture.
Mac OS X builds for the IA-32 architecture became available via a universal binary which debuted with Firefox 1.5.0.2 in 2006.
Starting with version 4.0, Firefox was released for the x64 architecture to which Mac OS had migrated.
Version 4.0 also dropped support for PowerPC architecture, although other projects continued development of a PowerPC version of Firefox.
Firefox was originally released for Mac OS X 10.0 and higher.
The minimum OS then increased to Mac OS X 10.2 in Firefox 1.5 and 10.4 in Firefox 3.
Firefox 4 dropped support for Mac OS X 10.4 and PowerPC Max, and Firefox 17 dropped support for Mac OS X 10.5 entirely.
The system requirements were left unchanged until 2016, when Firefox 49 dropped support for Mac OS X 10.6 to 10.8.
Mozilla ended support for OS X 10.9 to 10.11 in Firefox 79, with those users being supported on the Firefox 7080 SR branch until November 2021.
Most recently, Mozilla ended support for Mac OS 10.12 to 10.14 in Firefox 116, with those users being supported on the Firefox 115 ESR branch until late 2024.
In September 2024, however, an extension was announced for the 115 ESR branch for an initial period of 6 months.
This extension has been renewed one more time, leading the end-of-life date to September 2025. Here's the video of opening Wikipedia main page with Mozilla Firefox 136 on Fedora Linux 41.
Since its inception, Firefox for Linux supported the 32-bit memory architecture of the IA-32 instruction set.
64-bit builds were introduced in the 4.0 release.
The 46.0 release replaced GTK 2.18 with 3.4 as a system requirement on Linux and other systems running X.org.
Starting with 53.0, the 32-bit builds require the SSE2 instruction set.
Firefox for Mobile, codenamed FEDEC, was first released for Maemo in January 2010 with version 1.0 and for Android in March 2011 with version 4.0.
Support for Maemo was discontinued after version 7, released in September 2011.
FedEx had a user interface optimized for phones and tablets.
It included the Awesome Bar, tab browsing, add-on support, a password manager, location-aware browsing, and the ability to synchronize with a user's other devices with Mozilla Firefox using Firefox Sync.
At the end of its existence, it had a market share of 0.5% on Android. In August 2020, Mozilla launched a new version of its Firefox for Android app, named Firefox Daylight to the public and codenamed Phoenix, after a little over a year of testing.
It boasted higher speeds with its new Gecko View engine, which is described as being the only independent web engine browser available on Android.
It also added Enhanced Tracking Protection 2.0, a feature that blocks many known trackers on the internet.
It also added the ability to place the address bar on the bottom and the new collections feature.
However, it was criticized for only having 9 add-ons at launch and missing certain features.
In response, Mozilla stated that they will allow more add-ons with time.
Firefox for iOS is not listed in this table as its version numbers would be misleading.
Prior to version 96, it used version numbers distinct from other Firefox versions, which share the core Gecko rendering engine.
The iOS app uses the operating system's rendering engine, WebKit, rather than Mozilla's Gecko. Mozilla initially refused to port Firefox to iOS due to the restrictions Apple imposed on third-party iOS browsers.
Instead of releasing a full version of the Firefox browser, Mozilla released Firefox Home, a companion app for the iPhone and iPod Touch, based on the Firefox Sync technology, which allowed users to access their Firefox browsing history, bookmarks, and recent tabs.
It also included Firefox's Awesome Bar, Location Bar.
Firefox Home was not a web browser. The application launched web pages in either an embedded view or for that one page, or by opening the page in the Safari app.
Mozilla pulled Firefox Home from the App Store in September 2012, stating it would focus its resources on other projects.
The company subsequently released the source code of Firefox Home's underlying synchronization software.
In April 2013, then Mozilla CEO Gary Kovacs said that Firefox would not come to iOS if Apple required the use of the WebKit layout engine to do so.
One reason given by Mozilla was that prior to iOS 8, Apple had supplied third-party browsers with an inferior version of their JavaScript engine, which hobbled their performance, making it impossible to match Safari's JavaScript performance on the iOS platform.
Apple later opened their Nitro JavaScript engine to third-party browsers.
In 2015, Mozilla announced it was moving forward with Firefox for iOS, with a preview release made available in New Zealand in September of that year.
It was fully released in November later that year.
It is the first Firefox branded browser not to use the Gecko layout engine as is used in Firefox for desktop and mobile.
Apple's policies require all iOS apps that browse the web to use the built-in WebKit rendering framework and WebKit JavaScript, so using Gecko is not possible.
Unlike Firefox on Android, Firefox for iOS does not support browser add-ons.
In November 2016, Firefox released a new iOS app titled Firefox Focus, a private web browser. Firefox Reality was released for augmented reality and virtual reality headsets in September 2018.
It supports traditional web browsing through 2D windows and immersive VR pages through WebVR.
Firefox Reality is available on HTC Vive, Oculus, Google Daydream, and Microsoft HoloLens headsets.
In February 2022, Mozilla announced that Igalia took over stewardship of this project under the new name of Walvik.
Firefox has also been ported to FreeBSD, NetBSD, OpenBSD, OpenIndiana OS/2, Arca OS, Sky OS, Risk OS, and the OS/AQ. And an unofficial rebranded version called Timberwolf has been available for Amiga OS 4. The Firefox port for OpenBSD is maintained by Landry since 2010.
Firefox is regularly built for the current branch of the operating system. The latest versions are packaged for each release and remain frozen until the next release.
In 2017, Landry began hosting packages of newer Firefox versions for OpenBSD releases from 6.0 onwards, making them available to installations without the port system. The Solaris 10 port of Firefox, including OpenSolaris, was maintained by the Oracle Solaris desktop paging team until March 2018, when the team was disbanded.
There was also an unofficial port of Firefox 3.6.x to IBM AIX and a v1.7.x to UnixWare.
In March 2011, Mozilla presented plans to switch to the rapid release model, a faster 16-week development cycle, similar to Google Chrome.
Ars Technica noted that this new cycle entailed significant technical and operational challenges for Mozilla, notably preserving third-party add-on compatibility, but that it would help accelerate Firefox's adoption of new web standards, feature and performance improvements.
This plan was implemented in April 2011.
The release process was split into 4 channels, with major releases trickling down to the next channel every 6 to 8 weeks.
For example, the nightly channel would feature a preliminary and stable version of Firefox 6, which would move to the experimental Aurora channel after preliminary testing. Then to the more stable Beta channel, before finally reaching the public release channel, with each stage taking around 6 weeks.
For corporations, Mozilla introduced an extended support release (ESR) channel with new versions released every 30 weeks, and supported for 12 more weeks after a new ESR version is released, though Mozilla warned that it would be less secure than the released channel, since security patches would only be backported for high-impact vulnerabilities.
In 2017, Mozilla abandoned the Aurora channel, which saw low uptake, and replaced Firefox Developer Edition onto the Beta channel.
Mozilla uses A/B testing and a staged rollout mechanism for the release channel, where updates are first presented to a small fraction of users, with Mozilla monitoring its telemetry for increased crashes or other issues before the update is made available to all users.
In 2020, Firefox moved to a 4-week release cycle to catch up with Chrome in support for new web features.
Chrome switched to a 4-week cycle a year later.
Firefox source code is free software, with most of it being released under the Mozilla Public License, MPL, version 2.0.
This license permits anyone to view, modify, or redistribute the source code.
As a result, several publicly released applications have been built from it, including Firefox's predecessor Netscape, the customizable Pale Moon, and the privacy-focused Tor browser. In the past, Firefox was licensed solely under the MPL, then version 1.1, which the Free Software Foundation criticized for being weak copyleft, as the license permitted, in limited ways, proprietary derivative works.
Additionally, code only licensed under MPL 1.1 could not legally be linked with code under the GPL.
To address these concerns, Mozilla relicensed most of Firefox under the tri-license scheme of MPL 1.1, GPL 2.0, or LGPL 2.1.
Since the relicensing, developers were free to choose the license under which they received most of the code to suit their intended use. GPL or LGPL linking and derivative works when one of those licenses is chosen, or MPL use, including the possibility of proprietary derivative works if they chose the MPL.
However, on January 3, 2012, Mozilla released the GPL-compatible MPL 2.0, and with the release of Firefox 13 on June 5, 2012, Mozilla used it to replace the tri-licensing scheme. We will continue about Firefox in final part 4, so stay tuned.